Now jump ahead to 3:50 to go in the first quarter. It's still a 3-0 Eagles lead, and the Steelers have a 3rd and 18 at the Eagles' 19-yard line. Now, those of you that remember, the Steelers had recovered a fumble on a punt, and so they got the ball deep in Eagles territory, and then they got the ball down to the Eagles' 4-yard line. And then a kind of shoving match ensued after Darnell Washington blocked, one would say, past the whistle. You know, they say like play through the whistle. He probably played through the whistle and some a little bit. But at least he blocked someone well off of the field of play. But there was a shoving match that ensued, and definitely there was a lot of shoving from both sides. And the ultimate result was a penalty was only called on Pittsburgh, which, I don't know, people can go back to the tape and read things however they want to as far as blame. But I will say that almost universally, it's hard for me to think of any examples when there have been two teams shoving at each other and they haven't had offsetting penalties. I mean, that's just what happens every time. If both sides do something, the penalties usually offset and they replay the down. I will say I was shocked to see that there were only penalties called on Pittsburgh, and so was Mike Tomlin. If you saw his reaction, we tweeted out a short. He had some choice words to say to the referee that was trying to explain to him why that happened. Anyway, that gets us to this situation where the Steelers have a 3rd and 18, and basically they need to get to the 1-yard line to get a first down, and are trying to convert here. Let's take a look at the play that they run, and then we'll break it down in a little more detail. So Russell Wilson takes a snap from the shotgun, and he throws to Freiermuth, and it sails over his head into the end zone. Incomplete, and the Steelers end up having to kick a field goal. So if you ask me why did I pick this play, one, it's a pretty high leverage situation here that had the Steelers been able to connect here, this would have been a chance for them to take the lead. They've forced 2 turnovers at this point, and ultimately with that field goal got a total of 3 points off of them, which is something that I think would really come back to bite them later in this game. But the other thing is this play reminds me a lot of the touchdown that Pat Freiermuth scored against the Browns last week, so I wanted to compare those two plays as well. First, let's kind of get into what the Steelers are doing here. They're in 11 personnel with 1 running back and 1 tight end, Freiermuth, and their 3 wide receivers here are Van Jefferson, Mike Williams, and Calvin Austin. So what they end up doing here is they run Jefferson on an out route. This Williams-Austin bit looks a bit off. They end up running very close to each other. Too close to each other for me to believe that this was the actual play design. And then on this side, Freiermuth comes down the field and he runs an in-cut. And so the Eagles are playing quarters coverage. So each of these guys is responsible for a deep quarter of the field. And this is typically a coverage where you're trying to prevent a deep play. Here, they need to not give up 18 yards. And so they go into quarters with just defenders sitting underneath. They've basically got 4 deep and then 3 shallow underneath. They've got 2 of them shifted over toward the bunch and then 1 kind of shallow guy in the middle of the field. Wilson is looking down the field here, trying to get this safety to move over here. And what it looks like is he comes down the field and then comes back and throws it to Freiermuth. And that ends up being an incomplete pass. Freiermuth clearly expecting a pass coming inside. Wilson expecting Freiermuth to go up the seam. And just for some context, before we break down what each of them was thinking, let's go back to the Steelers-Browns game and let's kind of take a look at what happened on the touchdown to Freiermuth so we can compare. All right, so just to jog your memories, here is the touchdown from Wilson to Freiermuth. Freiermuth starts right here. So if you want to watch the route that he runs, he goes right up the seam. Wilson fires it in there for a touchdown. And I think what's really telling to how this play worked is by watching Wilson from the end zone view here. So he takes the snap and he initially looks over to his left and he's trying to move this middle of the field safety. So he keeps his eyes to the left, and then you can see the safety's reaction in a couple beats here. Look at the safety moving over, taking a couple steps to the left because Wilson had been staring there. But Wilson comes back very quickly, and he's made that little opening with the safety moving over like that and fires it in there and for the touchdown. And for those of you that are like, we broke this play down on the Steelers-Browns film review last week, my apologies, but I just wanted to put this in there really quickly for those people that didn't watch that film review. So he looks off the safety to the left, gets the safety to move, comes back to the right, hits Freiermuth up the seam for the touchdown. So that's the context from last week. All right, so now that we've seen what Wilson did last week, let's look into what he was doing this week. So Wilson, again, if you look, is looking more down the middle of the field or toward the left. And look at this quarter safety. So remember now we've got 4 deep here. This safety does kind of move his leverage. He's really looking at this combination route. I think he's really worried about an Austin post because Austin has scored on a post a couple times this year. And so Wilson's eyes, he does actually create room up the seam, and it looks like he's trying to throw that same ball he did against the Browns. And we can see it from the end zone view. Unfortunately, we don't have that reverse view that we had in the Browns game. We have from straight ahead. But look at Wilson's eyes. He's looking this way. He's trying to move that safety, and he's trying to do exactly what he did last week. And look, he snaps back and throws. It's a trust throw. Like, you know, he, just like against the Browns, he just comes back and throws it. He's expecting Freiermuth to go up the seam. Freiermuth did not go up the seam, and so this ball falls harmfully to the turf, incomplete. Well, why Freiermuth didn't go up the seam is a sight read issue. So if you remember against against the Browns, there was one middle of the field safety. Right. So a lot of times when people are running routes up the seam, they have a choice. It's a sight adjustment. If you have a middle of the field safety, then the adjustment is to run up the seam. But when you have quarters, which is a middle of the field open coverage, in this situation, you're a lot more likely to have the other safety come and undercut. So the read often in this situation, since there isn't just a safety sitting right in the middle of the field, is to take the route and bring it in instead of going up the seam. And that's what Freiermuth seems to be doing here. He reads quarters coverage, and so he brings it in. Wilson, however, feels confident in his ability to manipulate the safety, which the safety does go over. And so he wants the seam. So it's just a miscommunication here. I think Freiermuth is anticipating that, okay, since they're playing quarters, I'm going to come in. But Wilson is basically like, I don't care that it's quarters. I think I can get a window to throw the seam, and I can help make that with my eyes and with the formation. We can have a window. Not sure why they read it differently like that. I think like the way that you read it on like a page of a playbook is when it's like cover 3 or cover 1, you go up the seam. When it's cover 2 or cover 4, you come in. But clearly Wilson wasn't thinking that way, and I mean, by my eye, the seam was open, and this would have been a touchdown if they had carried it through. But Freiermuth read it differently. He thought that the read would be the in cut. Wilson thought the seam. He was trying to recreate what they did last week, and unfortunately they weren't on the same page, and this pass fell incomplete. What could have been a 7-3 lead became a 3-3 tie instead. Just one last look at Wilson looking over to his left and then snapping right back, expecting the seam but not getting it, and the Steelers are forced to kick a field goal.